letter N. And hello, Careless Forever. That's an interesting name. I wonder where that's from. And hello, Deirdre. Welcome to everyone to Meditation Live, and welcome to those of you joining us on YouTube. Today's discussion is on the science of meditation, and I'm joined today by Dr. Pallavi Visvanathan. Hello, Dr. Pallavi.
Hi, hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you. I'm so excited about this topic. It's so deep. It's getting deeper every day. There's so much work being done to expand our understanding of meditation scientifically. And before we begin, I'd just like to let everyone know that there are some very powerful interactive features available, but they're only available on the app, which can be downloaded on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. They are interactivity. That means you can speak directly to us, directly to Dr. Pallavi. Ask her some questions. Put those questions in the chat box, in the Q&A box, or raise your hand. We'll enable your microphone and we can hear your voice and have a real conversation. It's so much fun. Otherwise, hello on YouTube Live, and I hope you enjoy this discussion. I will now pass things over to you, Dr. Pallavi. I'll first introduce myself, though. My name's Stefan. Hello. I'm a meditation and mindfulness podcaster, content creator, general enthusiast, and teacher. And I'm a host here at Meditation Live, and I'm joined today by Dr. Pallavi. For those of you just joining us, our discussion today will be on the science of meditation. So I get you to lead through a practice to get us settled into today's topic, and we'll begin our discussion on it. I'll pass things over to you. Thanks, Dr. Pallavi.
Sure, yeah, okay. So I thought that we'd start with a focused attention practice. So we'll go ahead, close the eyes if that's comfortable for you, wherever you're joining us from. If you are seated, bringing the feet flat on the floor, and if you can, with the ankles aligned below, directly below the knees, palms resting, face down, face up, it's up to you, but wherever is comfortable for you. And drawing the back straight, so not too tight or tense, but also not slouching. So we bring the body into alignment to model the attitude of attentiveness, of awareness that we bring to the practice. So once we've brought the body into alignment, starting to bring awareness and attention to the breath. And for each of us, where we notice the breath most vividly in the body might be a little bit different. And so we'll take a moment to explore the breath a little bit, or explore where awareness of the breath is the strongest. So first, bringing attention to the tip of the nose, noticing the passage of air that as it comes in and out of the nose, in and out through the nostrils. You might notice in particular sensations of temperature. Often air entering the nose is a little bit cooler, and the air that's leaving the body is now a little bit warmer. So that might be one aspect of the breath that you bring attention to. There may even be a sense of the actual movement of the breath as it enters the nasal cavity and as it exits. You could also explore following the breath in the chest or the abdomen. So on the inhalation, noticing the expansion of the chest and the lower abdomen, the movement of muscle, of skin, and even of bone, the rib cage. And then notice the the falling back of the skin, muscle, bone on the exhalation. And in this way, we really, when we talk about focusing attention on the breath, we're really following the movements of the breath in the body, or the sensations of the breath, wherever you feel it most clearly. And each time that you become aware that attention has shifted away or drifted, this is a moment of awareness, actually, that we become aware that attention has shifted, and we very deliberately draw attention back to the breath or back to the movements of the breath. And then to end this practice, simply opening the eyes and bringing attention back to sense of sight, as well as whatever else may be in the room or any other sensory information that may become available to you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Visvanathan. I will give everyone a moment to settle back in, and if you like, use the Q&A box in the chat box to tell us how that experience was for you and anything that came up, any questions you might have about it. So, Doctor, you have a special background. It's a rare combination of meditation, mindfulness, knowledge, as well as a scientific understanding of it, since you're a clinical psychologist. Can you introduce yourself a bit and talk a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and my background is in cognitive behavior therapy. And I started to be involved in mindfulness meditation, both personally and professionally, about 10 years ago. And I really became involved with it from a research angle. From a personal perspective, I was actually quite skeptical, but I became involved in a project that was testing a mindfulness-based intervention for depression. So I've been involved in research around mindfulness-based meditation and interventions for depression and anxiety for the last 10 years. And that's sort of primarily been my research involvement. But of course, because I've had a little bit of a skeptical bent to the subject overall, it's also been very interesting to me to keep track of the broader literature to understand really what are we talking about when we talk about meditation, what effects does it have on emotion, behavior, neural networks, how these are all interrelated and interconnected. So it's a very interesting topic to me, and perhaps to everyone that's joined us today as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people, and definitely came across meditation with a skeptical mind as well. And I found that skeptical, practical, mind that loves, proof or something at least really tangible, has been very powerful to get me to continue to ask questions, continue to dig. So what have you found in your constant digging, constant questioning that has been most significant regarding, the hard, provable truths of what meditation does with our mind and body?
So, I would say that the scientific investigation of meditation in the West, anyway, is not that old. It's about, I'd say, 20 years, 25 years, which sounds like a lot of time, but actually, if you think about the fact that most studies take several years to conduct and complete, it's actually not a ton of time for a lot of literature to develop. But I think that we're at a place where there are some really solid findings and there's some solid evidence. I'd say the strongest evidence for the beneficial effects of meditation are on attention. So the ability to pay attention and not be distracted, and to come back to whatever it is we're paying attention to, I'd say that that's probably where the strongest evidence lies. In addition to that, working memory. So the better attention we're able to pay to things, the better able we are to really remember. So in this moment that I'm aware and attending to what's happening, it's going to make it more likely that I will remember what's happening later. So that's working memory is what we hold in our memory as we're experiencing it. So attention and working memory, those are sort of the most solid findings, but there are also pretty reliable and reproducible findings on certain parts of our stress response and reactivity system. So the limbic system in the brain, the amygdala is a small part of the brain that's responsible for a lot of how we react to stress and stressful things. And there's good evidence that meditation reduces some of the reactivity in that part of the brain and increases some of the connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, which is in the sort of front part of the brain, and the connection between that and the amygdala. And that's really important because the amygdala is the part of the brain that is sort of our threat detector system. It reacts very quickly, very, very sensitively to perceptions of threat. And we need our prefrontal cortex to then kick in and say, okay, has this been addressed? Do we still need to deal with this? Can we now stand down? The prefrontal cortex is involved in sort of doing a pretty fine level of moderating our cognitive, emotional, behavioral responses. And so we want that connection to be strengthened, and we know that meditation does that. So these are some of the strongest findings, I would say. And then I'd say the last piece that also I think we have fairly good evidence is with loving kindness meditation. That there's good evidence that without a ton of practice, it has pretty strong effects on generosity and altruism. So these are sort of the three areas that I would say the evidence is the strongest.
Yeah, so so many powerful effects meditation has on things. In terms of like its relationship to these things changing, it's these amazing correlations have been found. But has there been research done on why this actually occurs? Like what are the phenomena happening in the mind during meditation that just causes all of this stuff to happen?
Well, I mean, we'll take the practice that we just did. It was a focused attention practice, and we focused on the breath. And there are other ways to do a focused attention practice. You can focus on a mantra, you can focus on prayer. And the idea is that as part of what we're doing with this practice is developing the neural circuits or creating the connections in the brain that are responsible for holding attention, recognizing when attention is shifted away, and then coming back. And so in what we just did, there was a very strong parallel to what we're talking about when we talk about attention broadly, is we focus on the breath, we notice when attention is now on something else, and we come back. And what we find, or what research finds, is that with hours and hours of practice, the degree of concentration on the breath or in some other object increases. The amount of the time lag between sort of getting distracted or mind wandering and then coming back is shortened over time. And so as these things are being practiced, it's essentially like anything else. When we practice pretty much any activity, there is a parallel with various, actually usually it's multiple parts of the brain that are being activated, but certain circuitry is being strengthened, and then that is generalized to other parts of our lives. So if we're practicing concentration in meditation, we start to develop the ability to concentrate when we're not in meditation, when we're just moving through our lives.
Okay, I've got a question here in the Q&A box. The question is there research around the ability to be physically healthy using mindfulness? And actually, when you answer this, is there a difference between the effects of meditation and daily mindfulness practice on things like this?
Well, so maybe I have a question for you, just to clarify this a little bit. When you're thinking about mindfulness versus meditation, what are you thinking of?
I know mindfulness is kind of a broad umbrella of practices, but I use the term mindfulness when I am talking about my mindset when I am not meditating, essentially, when I'm doing anything, when I'm simply in a sort of wakeful state of action throughout the day.
Yeah.
And meditation, I guess, is part of a mindfulness practice, but it's mindfulness with my eyes closed, where my attention is going more inward. So I separate the two just to understand the different roles of different practices and mindsets in my
Yeah,
life.
no, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you for describing that, because I just wanted to make sure I understood the question. And I think that's a really great way to describe the difference. And I'd say that, there's a lot of research that looks at trait mindfulness versus state mindfulness. And a trait is an enduring characteristic that, for any given person exists no matter what the circumstances are. And there is some evidence to suggest that different people have different levels of trait mindfulness, that some of us, possibly as a result of what we experienced as children in our families, may have higher levels of trait mindfulness, and some of us have lower levels of trait mindfulness. So some people, even without meditation, may be better prepared to cope with all of the things that life can throw at you. What we find with meditation is that it increases trait mindfulness, and short bursts of meditation can generate states of mindfulness, and extended meditation practice can move us from just experiencing mindfulness in brief periods to something that's more of an enduring characteristic. So now I'm realizing I've forgotten the question. I'm not entirely sure that I answered the question, but maybe you can get me back on track if that's the case.
Yeah, no, I will. Thanks for actually going deeper into that, because it kind of basically, for me, it takes, for me, meditation is like the practice, and mindfulness is my way of making meditation continue to be a solidified, state of mind in my life. So and it's good to kind of understand that relationship for a lot of our attendees here. And I'll repeat the question. It has to do with physical health. Everyone thinks about meditation as a really mental process, something that affects our mind. What's the relationship to the body?
Yeah. So, I would say that the mind and body are really connected. I mean, this is probably not a surprising statement for our day and age anyway. And yet, we're still discovering all of the ways in which things are connected. So if we're talking physical health broadly, I'd be interested in the person who asked the question, if they could provide an example of what they mean by physical health. But if we're talking about muscle conditioning, I don't know that there's great evidence that meditation is going to help for that, or that we even have a conceptual or theoretical reason to think that it would. However, there are certainly things like inflammation markers. So the degree to which our body mounts an inflammation response when certain things go awry in the body, that appear to be affected by meditation. And this is still, I'd say, fairly new research. It needs to be replicated. It needs to be examined further. But there's evidence to suggest that meditation can have an effect on how our body responds to physical stressors, and can then determine outcomes. So one of the cases, one of the ways in which inflammation is really important is in the development of Alzheimer's disease, which is a big issue, and it's one that currently we don't really have any treatments for. So if it turns out that meditation can really influence our inflammation response, and that has an effect on Alzheimer's disease, that's a very, very strong connection to physical health. And then more broadly, something like pain, what we think of as physical pain is actually, we have really good evidence that meditation affects our experience of physical pain. So that's another example of how meditation could affect our physical experience.
Right. Pain resilience, right? It's they're not as reactive to it and we can handle more discomfort.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. Got a lot of questions coming in. I'm just going to throw them at you. Even if they're not worded in scientific language, you can let us know if there's scientific findings regarding them. From Pradeep here, I'm just going to start with the first one. Um, it has to do with meditation and the struggles he might be having with introversion. So if someone's an introvert and they're struggling with that,
Mhm.
how does meditation help with that scientifically?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not aware of any particular studies around that. I can certainly theorize about how it might be helpful. Um, it just sort of broadly speaking, one of the ways in which introversion can make life a little bit challenging, and I can speak from personal experience because I consider myself a little bit more introverted than extroverted, is that being in prolonged social environments can be draining, can be challenging for a variety of reasons, but can feel physically draining. And one of the things that meditation helps us develop is resilience. It helps us develop the ability to be aware of our experiences, to be aware of our reactions to these experiences, and to modulate our reactions to stressful experiences. So if broadly we were to conceptualize introversion as affecting or influencing how stressful we might find certain circumstances we find ourselves in or situations, then I would certainly theorize that there could be a strong effect there. I'm not really aware of any particular research in that area, so it's a really good question, though.
Definitely. All right. There's a second part to the question, but I will get on to a few others since there are many and see if we can return to that. The next one is from Juan. It's about the differences between meditations. The meditation we did today, and then Siddha meditation and yoga meditation. And in fact, it's a really good way to talk about the research behind different kinds of meditation and how they all affect us differently.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a really fantastic question. So the bulk of the research, I mean, the vast majority of studies that have been conducted have been focused on a small set of meditative practices and traditions. So yoga related meditations, for example, there's certainly research around it out there. It just is not as extensive as some of the other research. So where there is the most evidence is, or what I would say is reliable evidence, is where the most studies have been conducted, and the most studies have been conducted on mindfulness-based meditation. So really our sort of current wave of meditation research began around when MBSR, if people have heard of mindfulness-based stress reduction. This is a insight meditation-based program or a Vipassana-based program that was created by John Kabat-Zinn now 20 plus years ago. And that's really what sparked all of the current wave of research in meditation. So the majority of research right now is on MBSR and mindfulness-based meditations, a little bit on transcendental meditation, some Zen meditations, but we just don't have enough, I would say, with other types. Now, even with the types of meditation that have been examined, there has been some examination, what we call sort of dismantling studies, trying to understand what different types of practices, how they might differentially affect different parts of the brain, differentially affect different capacities. And frankly, the data is pretty mixed at this point. And I think it's partly because our methods for examining these things are still relatively new, still being developed. And there's a lot of, there's some lack of clarity around how we define various things. As I said, it's not that the research is bad, it's at a very, we would expect this kind of progression. It's still in relatively early stages. So I suspect we'll get there. We're just not there yet.
All right, one more question here in the Q&A box from Anonymous. It's a bit of a challenge to the very scientific pursuit of meditation. While neuroscience has made great strides in our understanding of meditation, is it not limiting ourselves to physiology and denying the transcendental, the soul, and, you know, our spiritual immaterial aspects that we can't really nail down with, you know, this kind of really physical research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and it's something that researchers struggle with, grapple with. And this is where, you know, the study, really a lot of the research in this area boils down to, or perhaps, I don't know if all the researchers would agree with my characterization of it boiling down to, but I think of it as a study of consciousness, right? Like, how do we understand consciousness? What's really happening when we talk about brain activity and mental activity? What does it we really mean? And I'd say that actually things have progressed. We've developed methods to look at things much more closely than we could 15 years ago or 20 years ago. We're still very, very far from being able to really address what Anonymous is sort of pointing to. And I, you know, as challenging as it is, as certainly reductionist as our current methods and tools might be, I think there's no question it is, right? We're not really we're not getting at some of the higher level spiritual aspects of the various types of meditations, or what they're in their philosophical spiritual traditions are intended to do. We're not getting at that really completely in research, but there's a little bit of it. There's a little bit of it happening when you look at different types of meditators, yogis who've been meditating for decades, and to compare their self-reported experience and their fMRI data compared to a beginner meditator who has no sort of philosophical spiritual stake in this, that is being taught or trained in a certain practice, and then you put them in a scanner. So I would say absolutely, I totally agree with this person that we're not really, that there's a lot that we're not answering and not getting to. And I'd say, who knows where we'll be in 20, 30, 40 years or so.
Yeah, and that's why we all just keep practicing, right? Keep having our own individual experience.
Yeah.
And see what works for us, because, you know, we can't get the answers to everything from some scientific data, you know.
Absolutely, right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much that science is not looking at, and just because we don't have that data doesn't mean that all these practices that aren't being included aren't really useful or impactful in a variety of ways. So it really does, there is a very personal aspect of this that each person has to sort of figure out for themselves.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I guess we're not going to get to all 15 of the questions I had today. So much information to talk about here. But I look forward to doing this one again. I'll pass things over to you now, Doctor, to close things off.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we started today with a focused attention practice. And I'm thinking maybe we'll end with more of an open monitoring practice. So we'll bring the body into position again, just as we did with the first practice. So closing the eyes, feet on the floor, back straight. And we'll start with a moment of attending to the breath, wherever it is that you notice it most clearly, most vividly in the body. Noticing any sense of resistance or reluctance that may be present to narrow attention in this way. And then when you're ready, opening awareness or broadening awareness to encompass all aspects of experience in this moment. Noticing sounds that might be present in your immediate environment, or that may be coming through the app or my line. Noticing sensations of touch, temperature, connected with the movement of the body, or just contact with clothing, with the air around the body. Noticing any thoughts or ideas that may be present, perhaps a remembering of something that has been asked or said during this session. And as you notice each aspect of your experience in this moment, as you become aware of it, you might try the practice of noting. So silently labeling or noting sound or body sensation or thought, or even feelings or emotions that may arise. These can range from boredom to excitement, to sadness, to a sense of loss. Observing whatever it is that arises, silently naming it. And as best as possible, maintaining this broad sense, this openness to any and all aspects of awareness, of experience in this moment. And then very briefly, drawing attention back to the breath. Once again, narrowing attention for 1 or 2 rounds of breath, following the inhalation closely and then the exhalation. And then when ready, opening the eyes to end the practice. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us.